Alrighty, guys, welcome to another episode of Molecast. This is episode 5. It is August 30th, sometime in the world, depending on where you are. And first off, let me say congratulations to the server on reaching 10,000 plus members. We did it. Congratulations. Yay! Woo! Awesome. So for everyone who is new, welcome to our wholesome community. To all the, OGs, vets out there, we did it. Congratulations. Let's keep up the great work. Just a couple quick announcements before we jump into the episode today. Have you practiced? Don't forget, mod applications are now open if you're interested in being a mod for the server, because now we have 10,000 people. Good luck. So make sure that you fill out the application, and can't wait to see who will help manage our wholesome, chaotic energy. Also, just a quick plug to the science server. We do have a science server that is basically a spin-off of this server. We talk about science. If you're a scientist, thanks, Justyna. Aspiring scientist or someone who just vibes with science, feel free to join. Some recent updates in the science server. We now have study rooms, guys. Yeah. So we have voice chats. So if you're interested in doing some studying with a group, math problems, science problems, what have you. And we also have Groovy. So you can listen to some nice classical music while you're trying to do your homework. So hopefully we'll see you guys there. And then before we dive into the research, the subject for today, I want to introduce our guest contributor. So our guest contributor today is Eena, and Eena is just finished up her first year of her PhD, and her research focus is how people use online resources for self-directed language learning. Basically, what she does is she studies their practices, their motivations, their strategies, and communication skills. But the interesting part is that as she studies, self-directed language learning, there's a lot of connections to how musicians practice. And a lot of the basis of her research has come from how musicians have practiced. So I have asked for her help today in putting together this episode so we can examine, how we learn, both from a neurobiological perspective and from this language perspective. And really, how does this apply to music? And I have done my own case study in order to apply the specific things that Eena has provided for me and see if my research actually follows this model. So let's get started. So I was just saying earlier before getting on to starting the episode that I can't believe it's already September. Like, we've had the Discord now for 6 months. And with September, a lot of us are getting back to school, back to work, getting back to some semblance of normal. But, granted, there are some things that still aren't the same. We're still not having group rehearsals. We're still not having, in-person lessons for the most part. But learning is still occurring. And I thought it'd be really interesting to examine how we learn in terms of practice and how our brains process information and are able to translate it into effective and basically productive practice. So let me drop, and I did warn everybody beforehand that this Molecast was definitely going to have more pictures this time than in previous times. So let me first find our first picture for today, which is basically the human brain. So there are many different functional regions of the brain that allow us to perceive the senses around us and allow us to make memories and perceive our environment. So when we learn, we are presented with sensory information. And just a spoiler alert, our brains are constantly bombarded with sensory information. It's not only the information that we're trying to learn, which might be, say sans violin concerto number 3, but it may also be things such as hearing, the sounds that are going around you, neighbors pounding on the walls, phones going off, etc. Taste, maybe you're hungry or you just ate something, touch, smell, etc. Only about 1% of the sensory data that is coming into our brains is actually admitted. So 99% of the sensory information that's coming to our brains is actually rejected. So it's a lot of work for our brains to actually process this information. And it's also really important to note, too, that the receptors that are receiving this information, they're not actually evaluating the data that is coming in. All they're doing is just continuously transmitting. So it's not like you can sit and practice and, think, I'm really going to focus on this section of the preludium and allegro. It's just whatever you're being processed. So you have to actively focus on, I'm going to learn this section of preludium and allegro and ignore the fact that I'm starving and I haven't eaten since, 5 a.m. this morning. So there's also additional sensory information from our muscles, our joints, and other internal organs. So once this information enters the brain, it's relayed by numerous switching stations. And there's 2 main divides in sensory information. There's the upper brain and there's the lower brain. So here's the second picture that I'm going to drop into chat. Oh no, did I freeze? Oh no. I think my computer just froze. This is what happens when your Mac is 5 years old. Let's see if I refresh this. Intonation than using scales. So, in order to learn these scales, I decided, why don't I, motivate myself by making scale gang? And then seeing if, in the practice rooms here on the Discord, I could, analyze my practice and see if there's actual progress being made. So looking at my practice scheme, before, my practice was definitely based more on naive practice, which is when you're just playing the piece. There's really no purpose. You're just, playing it to have fun or to perform it to somebody. And also purposeful practice. So purposeful practice is when you set well-defined goals that you can measure your progress against in order to judge how well you've practiced. So some important keys that make purposeful practice different from a naive practice is that you have certain steps that you want to achieve in order to make a long-term goal. Well, for me, this is true. I have a couple long-term goals in mind for my violin career. Yeah, sure. First, I love Bach's Siciliana. It's something I love to hear, and one day I would love to play. But I'm not there yet. So that's one long-term goal that I would love to achieve. And number 2, I would love to be able to come up against pieces and not think, oh man, I can't play that because there's too many notes or it's too high. I want to have those skills that, if someone ever needed an amateur violinist, I'd be able to fill in for them, no problem. I see you, Zen. Number 2 of purposeful practice, you get feedback. So yeah, if you have followed my Instagram account, the handle is the same as the handle here on Discord. I also post practice videos. Thanks a lot, Discord. I also post practice videos on my Instagram account. And the purpose of me posting Instagram videos on my Instagram account is twofold. One, is I want to see the progress that I've made over time. And number 2, I'm looking for feedback. People that notice things that, maybe I'm not noticing because I'm so focused on one particular part of the piece. usually my intonation, but things such as, my bow hold, articulation, phrasing, etc. So that's another box that I check that I'm making purposeful practice. Number 3, I'm getting out of my comfort zone. And I am notorious for staying in a comfort zone because it's comfortable, right? You're safe and nothing really bad's going to happen to you. But I do have to say, from when I started 2 years ago to where I am now, there have been multiple times where I've had to leave my comfort zone. One was actually posting Instagram videos on Instagram. I did not start posting videos of my practice on Instagram until 2019 when Ray had the first Play with Ray with the LA Phil. And then after seeing other people, post their practice videos on the Bach double violin, the Bach double, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And initially, I'm not going to lie, it was really scary. And everything I posted, I thought sounded like crap. But then after a while, I got used to it. The second thing that got me out of my comfort zone was joining the Discord. So I was invited to join another Discord community it's called All Types of Violinists, much, much smaller than this Discord. Yes, there is another Discord community. And I was actually invited to that previously before the Ray Chen violin server was released. I want to say it was maybe like February 2019. I was invited to that, and I saw the design of Discord, and I was like, what is this? How do I work this Discord community? So I was like, oh, thank you to someone who followed me on Instagram for inviting me. I joined, and I completely ignored it. And then fast forward to March, we had a pandemic. Then Ray said, hey, look, I made a Discord community too. And I was like, well, this is kind of ironic. Like, I just joined a Discord. Why don't I just join this one too? Again, I joined this Discord. It was chaos. I think I joined 9 days after it was made. And I was like, nope. Maybe I'll just join just so I join, but I'm not going to actually participate. And then the first purge happened. Purge 1 that really wasn't meant to be a purge. And then after that was enough incentive, I better actually do something in this community. Otherwise, Ray Chen's going to purge me again. It's going to actually purge. Yeah, you did. You, you accidentally, prune. Thank you, Freya. So that was the incentive that I needed to actually participate in the community. So, it's important to get out of your comfort zone. Try pieces that you think might be too hard for you, to try, different strategies in your practicing. So I think I definitely check this box for number 3. I'm definitely getting out of my comfort zone. All right, awesome. So three out of 3 so far. Awesome. Yay. You have a way to monitor your progress. I do. I have the Instagram, which helps me monitor my progress. I'm really bad right now about posting videos. I'm going to get better. I also think too that I don't want to annoy people with my sad sounds. And I also have my teacher, but spoiler alert, I have no teacher at the moment. She is on maternity leave. This will come up later. I have a way to maintain, and then the next point, you maintain motivation. This is true. I definitely maintain motivation. I maintain motivation by being here on the Discord. I maintain motivation through our server recitals. And I maintain motivation because I'm part of Scale Gang. So whether you're, and having, the community to encourage me to practice and listening to other people practicing. And this kind of goes into one of the questions that I asked during Molecast, in the science server this week for Molecast, which was, how do you stay motivated to practice? And this is also a question that Ray asked on one of his IG stories, if people were having trouble maintaining motivation because of the pandemic. So first, from Ray's data, he found that 72% of people were having trouble maintaining motivation to practice during the pandemic, which, it's understandable. There's not really a clear-cut goal in mind since we're all, unable to have the performances that we're used to seeing. But if you're looking for motivation, I highly encourage you to go to the science server, because there's a lot of amazing comments that people made on how they stayed motivated. So some of the answers that I saw were that, people had teachers, people still had competitions, people were getting ready to apply for college. Someone said that they wanted to learn meme music. And I was like, yes, your answer must go into Molecast. They were motivated to practice because they wanted to learn meme music. There are a lot of people that were inspired to maintain motivation through the Discord, by following Ray, by following Two Step Violin, Hillary Hahn. Other people are motivated to practice because they wanted to see measurable improvement, and they wanted to, be better than they were, yesterday or 2 months ago. And also someone was inspired, was motivated to practice from the Berlin Phil. So shout out to the Berlin Phil. And there are many, many different responses. But maintaining motivation is important for purposeful practice. And finally, you give practice your full attention. I'm going to give myself half a check mark for this, because it's hard to maintain full attention if you're practicing on Discord. I know I give some people a hard time about not maintaining focus, because it's really hard. You see the chat just burr right by, depending on what you're up to, and you want to be engaged with people. I'm a people person. I love chatting, and as we all know, I now have 93,000 comments in the server. I don't know where that came from. But giving practice your full attention is also important for purposeful practice. I'm working on it. There's always things that are important for self-improvement. So that is purposeful practice. However, there is a third practice known as deliberate practice. And deliberate practice is basically all of the steps I just talked about for purposeful practice, except you have a well-defined field. Music is considered a well-defined field. We have, guidelines and standards that separate people who are amateurs versus people who are professionals. So that is considered a well-defined field. And number two, deliberate practice is also when you have an experienced teacher or coach which is actively involved. So I fit most of the criteria for deliberate practice here on the server, except as of this moment, I have no experienced teacher because my teacher is currently on maternity leave. So I have relied on the experienced members of our Discord community to guide me as I learn Preludium and Allegro by Chrysler. So I'm going to consider that a check in the deliberate practice box. So hooray, I did it. I am doing deliberate practice on the server. Hooray. So let's dive a little deeper into my deliberate practice using the notes and skills that Eena has provided. So there's a researcher that by the name of, and I'm going to totally butcher this, I'm sorry, Swedish researcher Anders Ericsson, wherever you are, Eena, I'm really sorry, who really researched this concept of deliberate practice in the 1970s. And what he observed was that his subjects would use to improve and hit upon the core factors of effective practice, which is to build mental representations, also known as patterning. So let's dive a little bit into patterning, because we do see patterns in classical music. And basically what patterning refers to is the brain's meaningful categorization and organization of sensory data based on relationships or commonalities. And the brain is able to store new information by linking it to patterns of related information already stored in existing memory. So by linking this newly stored information with relevant prior knowledge, the brain can sift through all this information that's receiving to make sense of the environment around it. So what am I basically trying to say? Well, this requires another photo. So this may look familiar to some of you, and this is not a trigger, but it worked out so well that I couldn't resist. So this is the Saint-Saëns Concerto number 3. And what you can see is I highlighted 2 sections of the violin concerto, a red section and a blue section. And when we are presented with something new, our brains are rapidly self-scanning the related patterns to those that match the new information. So when we're sight reading this music, we see this first motif. We got a couple quarter notes, we got this nice half note, and then, roughly about, 6-8 bars later, I'm not counting, we see the same motif happen again. So our brains go, oh, look, I just saw this. We can do it the exact same way. Wrong. Saint-Saëns is like, oh, nope, instead of playing a D the second time, a B the second time that you play this motif, we're actually going to play a D. And prediction is successful whenever our brains activate enough information from a patterned memory in order to interpret the pattern of the new input. And depending on the result of the prediction, the existing patterns relied upon to make that prediction are extended, fortified, or revised. So if I'm reading this piece for the first time and I trip up on that D, the next time I go to play that piece, my brain will revise that prediction and say, hey, actually, there's a different note coming up. And through observations, experiences, and feedback, the brain can increasingly learn about its environment, and it can make more accurate predictions about what will come next and how to respond to new information. And this really ties into something that I've heard a lot of teachers say, which is to listen and learn more about the music of different composers, not just the piece that you're currently learning. And the reason why is that, as humans, we tend to use particular motifs or particular settings in order to make sense of the world around us. So by learning about similar music that certain composers have done, you can learn your piece a little more effectively than just only focusing on this piece. And looking back, I kind of wish I would have done that for the Chrysler, but I'm too deep in it now. So, that is how we use patterning during deliberate practice in order to learn and make better neural connections. And another example that Eena gives is that chess is also used a lot to illustrate this. So all the chess players that are currently in the server, pro chess players actually don't recognize all the pieces on the board. Instead, they recognize the pieces as bigger chunk patterns that they then react to from experience. And basically, you can transfer this concept to music or violin playing. Sometimes you don't recognize all of the notes that you're initially playing during sight reading. You might recognize things as bigger chunk patterns, like, oh, this motif has come back again. Let's, try, and that's also a part of learning because you're basing it off of past experiences. And another piece of evidence that Ericsson found during his research was that you should probably keep practice sessions to no more than an hour. If you need longer, he recommends taking breaks to restore focus. And going back to some of the Molecast data that I gathered, a lot of people actually said that their practice sessions last about 2 to 3 hours, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. I've sat through a bunch of practice sessions on the server this week and last week. And a lot of people, it is true, they do sit in the practice room and practice for 2-3 hours, at a time. But within that time, they will have short breaks, like 5 to 10 minute breaks, get some food, get something to drink, maybe check their emails, etc. I also asked how much of that practice is focus practice. So the people who had shorter amounts of time, so 1 to 2 hours, said anywhere between 80 and 90% of their practice is focused. If you had longer practice sessions, maybe around 3-4 hours, they reported less, about maybe 60% focused practice. So you guys kind of, your practice strategies corresponded with the data. In addition, Eena also asked a friend about this, and the friend commented that concentration is important. But so breaks are also important, but breaks don't mean that you need to lie on the couch. You can practice in your head while you're letting your body rest. It's important to prevent injury, because also fresh muscles are more precise. So there's also a physical aspect about taking a break. And we'll go into mental practice after we cover some of this subject on deliberate practice. And in addition, in terms of maintaining motivation, working in groups is helpful. And what I've experienced with Scale Gang has been backed by research. Ericsson in 2006 and again in 2016 cited that those that participated in cooperative learning versus solitary learning saw more progress within their learning strategy versus those that were just individual practice. And what do I mean by practicing in a group? What I did in the server was I really paid attention to what people were trying to say in the chat about what I was doing. And I also made sure that I kept the group connected as to what my thought process was. So for example, going back to my favorite preludium and allegro, the introductory section is quarter notes that basically have a lot of force. And I would play these quarter notes and describe what I was thinking or what I was trying to achieve when I was playing particular sections. And the people who were in my practice room at the time would comment whether or not I was on the right track or if I should, focus on, different articulations or different strategies. Going to Scale Gang, shout out to Scale Gang, when I would practice my scales. Carl Flesch. They would really give a lot of support and guidance as to how if I would describe my hand position as being, oh wow, I'm feeling really tense as I try to play a high E on the D string above the harmonic D. Yes, I am traumatized by that note. They would try to talk me through how my hand structure should be, and why I should learn to play this note in the first place. So having that kind of support, like you can have here in the Discord, is incredibly helpful. And I definitely encourage all of you, if you haven't tried out the practice rooms yet, to definitely do that. For some of you who, hey, maybe I don't get a lot of people in my practice room sessions. How am I still supposed to be able to learn? No worries. Still keep up with the steps that I talked about in purposeful practice. Having steps for a long-term goal, getting out of your comfort zone. So trying to find people in general, if you can, or listening to other people's practice rooms. Finding ways to monitor your progress. Try Instagram, try social media. Also, reach out to some in-life friends via Zoom. Give a nice, or do some of our new server recitals. It's been incredible to see how many people recently have done self-server recitals. And I've gone to K's, I've gone to Prusnell's, gone to Segunho's, Cadenza, and they've all been amazing so far. That is one way to not only monitor your progress, but maintain motivation, because you have a recital that you need to actually prepare for. And the one thing that I definitely fail to do is give practice my full attention sometimes, because I'm so focused on what's going on in chat, and I shouldn't be. But if you're in a solitary practice room, there's no one in your practice room, you can actually give practice your full attention because you're not trying to talk to people. I know there are people that are much better at this than I am. I'm going to work on it. It's all about, self-awareness. But working in groups is helpful, and there's research that really backs what is trying to be achieved here on the Ray Chen Violin Discord. And there's really one summary that sums all of this up, and this is the Berlin Music Academy study. And in 1993, Ericsson performed a study where he basically, what he wanted to do was find out if there were differences in how groups of musicians structured their time and how much time they gave to music. And this is what he found, basically in summary. The most promising and the promising students were consistently found to practice more than the educational music group. And basically the way he set up the study was he had 10 students that were geared more towards music education, and another 10 students that were professional violinists, and another 10 students that were average, but still promising students. The first study in depth is this one. Eena lets me know that the sample size is understandable, and the overall goal is to find out about experts in particular. So she, in her field, believes that this is a sound study. That's great. And he also had 10 older pros. Thank you, Eena. So what he found was that the most promising and the promising students, so this average group, were consistently found to practice more than the musical education group, about 3.5 hours on average. And most practice done by these two groups was done before lunch, but it was distributed during the day. So none of the groups tried to get 4 hours solid before lunch. They maybe did an hour here, then they went and, chatted with somebody for 10 minutes, grabbed some coffee. Then they, came back, maybe practiced for another 30 minutes. Then they went to, 93, probably went out for a walk or something. Definitely weren't checking email. Uninterrupted practice sessions were usually between 1 and 1.5 hours long for the top groups. And this is pretty consistent to what Ericsson reported previously, that, most practice sessions should be around an hour. And I'm going to trigger you again, chat. The best groups reliably slept more than the teacher group. And the best group slept an average of 60 hours per week. So you have to sleep. Checo burr. And the top group was also found to take naps. So there is data that supports taking naps. And again, sleeping is important. We've had a Molecast episode all about sleep. You can catch it in the science server. And what this does is it helps to consolidate progress, particularly during the early days in a week, like the overall population as the week progresses. So like Monday, we're probably the most productive. By Friday, we spend the most time on leisure. So practice and nap time decreases during the week. And Ericsson, after performing this 1993 study, also replicated the study with pianists, and the results were consistent. With the addition, because piano is more easily measurable, they were able to find some consistent increase in cognitive motor abilities. So he did 2 separate studies, and what he found was pretty sound. That, having uninterrupted practice sessions that are about an hour to an hour and a half long with breaks and getting good sleep is important for learning. Also, he notes that increasing practice time too rapidly can lead to overuse and overtraining. And what Eena means by this is that if you try to, let's say, if you currently practice an hour a day or maybe an hour 15 minutes a day, I typically practice about 90 minutes a day. That's really 90 minutes to 2 hours a day. That's all my schedule can handle. But if I try to increase that to maybe 3 hours a day, this could actually lead to overtraining and causing my brain to shut out some of that sensory information because I'm just doing rote memorization and I'm not making new connections to help solidify the learning process. So if you're trying to increase your practice time, you should do it gradually in order to help make new neural connections and strengthen the ones that you currently have. Awesome. So after we're done with the active practice, deliberate practice, purposeful practice, we then have to deal with the concept of remembering what we learned and or forgetting what we learned. And there's a concept that's known as the forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve was first described in 1885 by psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus. I'm really sorry, Eena. And this is really old. And he did this in a series of self-experiments. And he would try to memorize random syllables without meaning and then periodically test himself to see how much he still remembered. So, and the basic idea of this experiment is to try to describe how information is lost after we first learn it, if there's no effort of trying to retain it. So let's say you sight read a piece of music, you've never seen it before in your life, and then you go back the next day and you want to see how much of that music that you've retained. Let's say Carmen Fantasy. And what he found was that after 20 minutes of doing this, he could only remember 60% of what he learned. So you really don't retain much information unless you try to connect it to previous information that you've had before and try to connect it to previous experiences that you had. And actually, Eena drew a wonderful graph that I'm going to also drop in the chat. Are we actually going to drop it? Or maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe Discord. Maybe Discord is... Nope, Discord won't let me. Okay, you win, Discord. I'm not fighting you. Till another day. And actually, this experiment has been replicated a number of times, most notably in 2015. But there's still a lot of debate as to how to describe it. Are there differences between individuals? Is there a general rule? How much is forgotten after exactly what amount of time, etc.? But overall, in Eena's field, this is an established concept that over time, you start to lose information if you do not actively try to connect it to your previous experiences and the world around you. So how do we do that? Well, the idea of spaced repetition or distributed practice is based on this forgetting curve. And the distributed practice effect refers to this effect of inter-study interval upon learning as measured on subsequent tests, and also known as ISI. And basically, it's separating different study episodes of the same material. And basically, what has been found is that over 100 years of distributed practice research, it's demonstrated that learning is powerfully affected by the temporal distribution of study time. So instead of trying to cram 4 hours of practice before your lesson or before some sort of exam, what you should do is you should actually space it out. So you should study, then recall, let's say, after an hour what you've tried to learn, then after 6 hours, then the next morning, then the day after, skipping 2 days, etc. So continually trying to go back and recall. The exact intervals Eena mentions that are best to use are hit and miss because, again, it's it's individually based. And it also depends on sleep. So you're not going to be able to recall information if you don't sleep, cough. But what she does mention and what's really important is you don't want to have to cram before you need to recall information. It's good to do this over time. And also, besides doing distributed practice, you should also do visualization or mental practice. And the idea of this is simple. You practice in your head. And the evidence on this really isn't substantial because the field is still ongoing. But the test designs are very, very restrictive. Subjects are not allowed to repeat passages to control the setting. But essentially, you can't go back and continually repeat what you're trying to learn in order to reinforce it. But essentially, mental practice can help with motor skills, and mental practice is still superior to no practice. So if you're short on time or if you're on a break, mental practice can still help to make those connections and help with motor skills. And she also mentions, again, if you don't have as much time to practice, but if you want to memorize something, mental practice is also really important if you combine it with the distributed practice concept. So say you practice in the evening. The next morning, let's say as you're getting your cup of coffee or if you're on your way to work, take 5 to 10 minutes to remember the score as best as you can and imagine playing it. And this is referred to as free recall. And this may be helpful for memory and reinforcing what you learned the night previous. In mental practice, she says, basically try to remember the score with as much detail as possible. And then finally, she also talks about one other method that you can use in order to reinforce what you've learned in the practice room, which is the serial position effect. And this is also described first by Ebbinghaus, and it is consistent of 2 separate observed effects. The primary effect, which is we're more likely to recall the first few elements in a list. The recency effect, we are most likely to recall the last few elements in a list. And then all the in-between stuff that's most likely to be forgotten. So if we had a list, let's say, of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, we would be more likely to remember facts 1 and 2 and 9 and 10, but forget 3 through 8. Because the primary C effect is that we'd probably remember the first few elements in a list, the last few elements in a list, but we're probably going to forget everything in between. So as you're practicing, try to focus as much as you can also on the middle section, because that's probably the part that you're not going to be able to remember as much during free recall. Alrighty, and then finally, I've left this to last because it took me, I have a lot of experience, and I'm sure everyone here does too, with receiving feedback. And this is definitely something that I'm trying to grow with as well. Oh my gosh, we have 10 minutes. Which is how to receive feedback and how to give feedback. This feedback is important for the learning process. And Eena gives a few points. And I have also received feedback in a practice room and given feedback in a practice room. And I think this is definitely something that all of us can use as we listen to people here on the Discord and as we go out and listen to people at concerts and in recitals, juries, etc. Good feedback versus bad feedback. Eena says that the subject should receive immediate informational feedback and knowledge of results of their performance, which is, I somewhat agree with, but this is research. This is actually sound research. I say I kind of agree with because after a performance, the adrenaline is just rushing through my body and I cannot hear anything. It's almost like my body is impervious to what is going on around me. Normally, if I need to receive feedback or if I want to receive feedback, I like to have people hold on to it and give it to me in an hour. Oh no, my Discord just yeeted. Again. Oh no. Wow. Discord. Oh, geez. God, that's the worst sound. Hi, welcome back. Yay, I'm back. I know, my Discord just yeeted again, and I just looked at the Discord status, and they're like, oh, look, we're implementing a fix. And I was like, yeah, nice job. You need to hire more people. Okay, so back to feedback. So the subject should receive immediate informational feedback and knowledge of the results of the performance. And the subject should repeatedly perform the same or similar tasks. I somewhat agree with this from personal experience because immediate informational feedback, usually right after a performance, I'm just riding on adrenaline, whether it was a really good performance or a really bad performance. So I can't really process the information that is being presented to me. So I like to usually have it later. But it is important to receive feedback in order to correct. even in practice, Eena, even in practice, the adrenaline, I'm riding on adrenaline. And it's a part of that flight or flight response. And then to assure effective learning, subjects ideally should be given explicit instructions about the best method and be supervised by a teacher in order to allow individualized diagnosis of errors, informational feedback, and remedial part training. This I definitely can see, depending on your skill level. Although it is possible to generate curricula and use group instruction, it is generally recognized that individualized supervision by a teacher is superior. And that is definitely true. If you're able to have some sort of teacher give you instructions and supervision in order to diagnose your errors and give you feedback, that's obviously the best method. Not everybody can, and not everybody is able to. But having the Discord here, you can still have people give you informational feedback and diagnosis of particular errors depending on your description. So I've seen it done here. I'm one of the success cases. I'm going to shout out Arca and Holly. I know Holly's not currently in chat, and I know Arca is busy doing something at the moment. But when I was practicing the Preludium and Allegro, I was having a lot of trouble with phrasing in a particular section, and they both gave me wonderful descriptions of what I could possibly do in order to improve that section. So you don't really need like a licensed teacher or something. I mean, depending on what skill level you are, yes, definitely have a skilled teacher because it'll make your life a lot easier. But if you're unable to get to a teacher, there are definitely knowledgeable people here on the Discord that are able to give you advice and feedback in order to help you out on your journey. Also, during my practicing escapades here on the server, Professor K, Professor Gogo, Professor Q have given me a lot of different advice and information as to how to practice my scales. And they have been able to diagnose a lot of errors that I've made, especially with tension and hand positioning, and a lot of informational feedback that I've literally just copy pasted and have put it in a Word document. So, you don't necessarily have to have a teacher, but I definitely agree with, having somebody state, hey, this is probably not the best way of doing it. And here's some feedback in order to help improve that. Overall, good feedback should be immediate, informative, specific, and actionable. Good job. I mean, we all say that a lot. I'm like notorious for doing that. Saying good job is, obviously good feedback, but even better feedback is pointing out the things that people are doing right in their practice or performance. Because then they're able to reinforce that, that tone is exquisite, so thick, much better than good job. And that's something that people can reinforce for future use. Bad feedback is general or directed at the person rather than the practice, cannot be acted on. And that I firmly agree with. Bad feedback can't really be general because you don't know, it goes back to good job. We don't know what is working and what is not working and what we need to reinforce. Also, bad feedback can also be directed at the person. And it doesn't have to be like negative feedback. And it can be positive feedback. It can be feedback that's like, you are such a great person versus, hey, Mole, those octaves were on point today. Yes. And even though, it's still all good feedback. It's still all positive feedback. But it's not feedback that someone can improve upon for future use. Something that is mentioned multiple times in my practice is when I get to a section of the Preludium and Allegro that has these evil double stops that are 16th notes. And every single time I hit this section, it just sounds like a train wreck every time. And Gogo gave me really solid advice and I will never forget it. Instead of just saying, oh, you just need to practice that section more, Gogo told me, hey, Mole, what you need to do is you need to practice this section slowly and really, really focus on, getting your notes in tune before trying to, tackle this double stop section. And I will never forget that, because let's face it, this particular section has so much going on. But it really helped me to reevaluate how I was practicing it. And I feel not entirely comfortable with it. I'm still learning it, but it's getting better. And that's all that matters. And again, optimal feedback indicates the difference between the current state and the desired state. My current state, I can't play the preludium, but my desired state is that someday I can. And the feedback will help students take a step to improve their learning. We've seen this in many master classes. That's kind of, the goal of a master class is to get feedback on, what you're learning currently with your pieces, and to indicate, the difference between your current state and what you want, which is a performance-ready piece, and to help students take that step to improving their learning. If you're asking for feedback, it's good to be specific. Ask listeners to pay attention to a specific aspect of your playing. And when I initially started practicing in the practice rooms, I just practiced and let the chat do whatever they wanted to do. But if you ask listeners in your practice room to pay attention to, let's say, intonation, or let's say, the phrasing of a particular subject, or just a particular aspect, it helps listeners to cue in on that and to give you more valuable feedback versus just listening to the entire thing. Because again, we're only able to process 1% of the information that's coming to our brains. So by giving the listeners something specific to pay attention to, it not only helps to give you valuable feedback, but it helps with the cooperative learning process, which again helps everyone to learn, not just you. It also puts you in the right mindset to receive suggestions, and it makes your listeners more comfortable in paying attention, and then verbalizing what they're hearing and thinking. Big, huge asterisk here, though. Your own internal stance towards feedback matters. If you are someone, bye Ray. If you are someone that is not willing to take on feedback, you can't ask for feedback. And this is huge. There was a time, there are still sometimes times, especially if I'm lacking on sleep or food, that I'm not open to receiving feedback. Hey, look, everybody has times where they're not open to receiving feedback. We're all human. But if you're always resistant to receiving feedback, that will also inhibit your growth in learning. And ways that you can help with, improving your internal stance, some things that helped me were to realize that people were commenting on my particular, they're commenting on my playing. They weren't commenting on me as a person. Like, I know who I am as a person. I'm Mole. I'm a wholesome, sometimes spicy server scientific sauce. That is me. But they weren't commenting on, they were commenting on my playing, not on me as a person. And actually, Ray has a really good excerpt of this on one of his videos. I think it was maybe the review with Ray 4 video, I believe. And this is something that actually pops up a lot on Instagram, especially with the amateur musician community, is that there's a lot of people who comment and give feedback, and whether we should take a stance, whether feedback should be solicited or unsolicited. It's important, maybe there's feedback. For example, something I've always said in the practice rooms is I get a lot of feedback on my vibrato. It's tight. I know I need to work on it, but it's not a goal right now. But right now I'm not open to feedback. for improving my vibrato. But I will be in the future, just not right now. Right now, I'm open to feedback for improving my intonation, improving my bow control, improving my basics. Someday I'll get to the vibrato, but not today. And that's me doing some self-awareness and self-analyzation of the feedback that is mattering to me. Like, you don't have to be open to all feedback. You just, have to be open to, the feedback that you need. All right. And then finally, giving feedback. So when giving feedback, you also need to be specific. And we kind of talked about this. Saying good job is great. Everybody feels good in the moment. But more effective feedback is, you did a really great job on that tone. It was so thick. Or, oh my gosh, this ricochet section was so clean, super clean. If someone needs improvement, you could always say, maybe you could try this bow stroke. Again, going back to the feedback I got from Arca and Holly, with the preludium, maybe you could try this with your phrasing. So it's something that's incredibly helpful and useful. If you're looking for examples on how to give helpful feedback, Eena suggests that you go back and watch Ray's videos of all the review videos that he does. She says, he says a lot of things like, you could also think about a section like this or try a section like that, because this helps us most when we're stuck. It helps us to change perspective and to try something different. And I firmly agree with that. If you listen to Ray either through the YouTube videos or even sometimes when he pops in and does a masterclass, sometimes he has been known to pop into a practice room from time to time. He does give a lot of helpful feedback. And that's definitely someone you can model yourselves to in order to improve your own feedback. Alrighty, so so that's pretty much the episode of today. To really keep in mind that there's many different types of practicing strategies, naive practice, purposeful practice, and deliberate practice. And there are ways that we can reinforce the practice that we have in order to solidify it, using distributed practice, mental practice, or interleave, or the serial position effect. And in order to improve on our practice, we should always be seeking feedback, both giving and receiving. And in order to really reinforce this practice, it's all about our biology. If we understand how our brains work, with how our minds process sensory information and distribute sensory information in our minds, we're going to be able to perform better practice. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for all the heart blobs in the chat. Thank you guys so much for all of your help. If you have any questions, I suggest that you post them in the science server. I'm thinking of probably just making a separate channel for that because we're already running over on time and my Mac is starting to die. Thank you so much. Shout out to Eena for all of her help in all the research that she did. So claps to Eena in the chat. I'm clapping for you like this. Yay, Eena, yay. Again, if you are interested in being a guest contributor or being a guest host for a future Molecast, please DM me. I love having additional scientists and featuring their research and what they're passionate about. And then also, I can't wait to see more people in the practice rooms coming up. I hope this inspires you and motivates you to go into a practice room and practice, even if it's just scales. You can join Scale Gang in spirit and, practice some scales. I can't wait to see all of you. I can't wait to be able to listen to all of you in the practice rooms. And hopefully this is just inspiring. Last point. Next Molecast is a scheduling change. Next Molecast is not on a Sunday. It will be on Saturday, September 12th. Time to be announced. And I will also announce the subject then. I'm kind of up in the air. I've got 2 subjects that I'm really excited about. But I need to make a decision. I need to commit. But I just wanted to let you guys know right up front, we are switching the day of Molecast for this episode. I've got some scheduling issues going on September 13th. So we're going to push it to Saturday. And as always, if you have any suggestions for future Molecasts, please dump them in the science server under help and suggestions, or send me a DM. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed doing the case studies and sitting in on listening to everyone's practice and listening to all the amazing feedback that you've given me. And I really hope that you guys have a great day. So see you later on the Discord. So bye, guys.